Is a Pocahontas costume offensive to Indigenous people? Why are Indigenous people offended by a Pocahontas costume? And why are some people not offended by it? Hi there, I'm Mallory, and I help Indigenous people and allies learn about Indigenous culture and how to live with resilience using Native teachings. In this video, I'll be talking about why some Indigenous people or non-Indigenous people find the Pocahontas costume offensive and why some people do not. To put this video together, I had to do some research, asking our online community what people think, how they feel about this topic, and why they feel offended or not offended about a Pocahontas costume during Halloween or any other costume party situation. After listening to what our online community had to say and some of my personal connections, family members, friends, and other trusted elder advisors and allies, I then analyzed, compartmentalized, and organized all of the feedback I received from all of my sources to be able to give you guys a clear answer on if the Pocahontas costume is offensive toward Indigenous people or not. So here we go with the results. There really are 6 categories or groups of responses. 3 in the yes, it's offensive category, and 3 in the no, it's not offensive category. So I've put together 3 reasons why people might be offended by a Pocahontas costume for Halloween, and 3 reasons why people are not offended by the Pocahontas costume. So the first 3 categories of responses from this question are reasons why people, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, are offended by the Pocahontas costume. The first group of people who find the Pocahontas costume offensive was those who gave the educated fact checker response. You know who you are. If you're dressing up as a Disney character, Pocahontas, some people, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, are constantly reminded when they see a Pocahontas costume that the Disney animated movie of Pocahontas is portrayed completely different than the true story of Pocahontas. I'm not going to get into the details on the true history of the real Indigenous girl named Pocahontas, but apparently she was treated very poorly by John Smith. And to keep it PG, she passed away at a young age, and it was violent and horrible. Anyone who wants to add information about the true history of Pocahontas in the comments, you are welcome to do so. But I'm going to go through the other 5 responses of whether Indigenous people find the Pocahontas costume offensive and why some don't. So moving on to the second type of response in the yes category of I'm offended or why people are offended by Indigenous Pocahontas costume. So the second group of people who find the Pocahontas costume offensive was those who give the cultural appropriation response. Some Indigenous people are offended by anyone portraying any Indigenous person who is not Indigenous themselves. Cultural appropriation is when you are claiming something to be of Indigenous background when you know it's not. This can be anything that has an identity, any form of identity attached to it. So it can be something that you created, such as a product or a person or a place. If you're a bit confused on what exactly cultural appropriation is, because the term is thrown around a lot, watch this video right here to understand what exactly cultural appropriation is and how to avoid it if you're aiming to be an Indigenous ally. So the second group of offended people are those who find the Pocahontas costume to be appropriating Indigenous culture, which, if you want to know my opinion, I feel like the only time that it's not cultural appropriation is when you're wearing a costume and you're knowingly representing something else for Halloween. Now, please don't bite my head off here, people, but cultural appropriation is claiming something is culturally Indigenous when it's not. So if you're wearing a costume for the sake of pretending to be a certain character or animal or something else, then maybe it's labeled as something else, but I don't know about cultural appropriation. So specifically, Halloween costumes, you're not really claiming that identity in your real life, right? It's just for the holiday or event that's taking place that day. Now, that is all I'm going to say about that, about the Pocahontas costume being cultural appropriation on Halloween specifically. And folks who have this reasoning for being offended by it, that is okay, that is up to you. Now, on to the third category for being offended, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. Okay, so the third group of people who find the Pocahontas costume offensive was those who give the gatekeeper response. Gatekeepers, also known as the cultural appropriation police, unfortunately get offended by anyone participating in cultural anything who is not 100% blood quantum, full status, born, raised, living, and working on the res. The response by a gatekeeper is generally more extreme than any other kind. In case you don't know exactly what a gatekeeper is, gatekeepers are people who set rules or restrictions for participating in something. And for more understanding on what I'm talking about in the context of Indigenous culture, watch this video right here. This group of people are most likely to be offended by any person dressing up as Pocahontas. Even if they're Indigenous, it's not okay to be Pocahontas for Halloween. Actually, what I've found is that they find it even worse if you're Indigenous. You are offending your own people by trying to represent Pocahontas. What do you guys feel about this response? Do you agree or do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. If any of these responses are ones that fit into or align with what you think, I would love to read what you feel about this topic, so please share in the comments below. So now you know the first three reasons or responses why people, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, are offended by the Pocahontas costume. And now the next three categories of responses from this question are reasons why people, Indigenous or non, are not offended by the Pocahontas costume. So the first group of people who do not find the Pocahontas costume offensive was those who give the whatevs response. This group of people are generally indifferent to topics surrounding controversy or confrontation, difficult conversations in general. Sometimes these folks just aren't offended by stuff or don't have any opinion on the matter whatsoever. There's nothing wrong with this. Some people just don't want to engage in anything that might be controversial or cultural appropriation related or political, and nothing like that. These group of people wouldn't respond to any form of poll because they've got better things to do. And likely if you ask them about their thoughts, they would change the topic. So I'm not gonna spend any time expanding upon this response. But that's what the first type of responses would be for someone who is not offended by the Pocahontas costume. They're just not paying attention to it whatsoever. So now on to response number 2 for people who are not offended by the Pocahontas costume. The second group of people who do not find a Pocahontas costume offensive was those who are knowledgeable of Pocahontas's true story, and they also know that most of the Disney princess characters are based off of fiction, meaning that the Disney creators made the storylines up. This group of responders who do not find the Pocahontas costume offensive are culturally aware of Indigenous cultural appropriation, but know that the media, including movie creators, use pieces of historical events that spark creative storytelling. Many Disney characters are based off fiction and entertainment. For this response, the focus is on the overall creative production of childhood storytelling and the awareness that movies like Pocahontas brings to Indigenous culture in general is the focus, right? That's the positive side. And the negative feelings that are tied to the true story is completely different from the Disney version of Pocahontas. Phew! So now that we're on to the sixth and final type of response as to whether Indigenous people or non-Indigenous people find the Pocahontas costume offensive. Okay, so the third group of people who do not find the Pocahontas costume offensive was those who absolutely love Pocahontas. This could be any Indigenous or non-Indigenous, any cultural background, gender, non-specific, all included here. So this group of responses to the Pocahontas identity or brand can be felt by anyone, Indigenous or non-Indigenous. These people who love Pocahontas can often identify with her, or they look up to her as sort of a role model. Many people actually admire the character of Pocahontas for being beautiful, courageous, and a resilient member of her community. She is portrayed as a brave individual who is fierce, who overcomes obstacles, and is graceful while facing challenges. The traits that the character of Pocahontas possesses in the Disney movie are really positive ones. And for some people, that is what stands out to them. And when they see a Pocahontas costume, they feel how it represents a powerful female character, just like other superheroes or warriors that are beloved across the world for their own brand identities. Now, I would love to know which of the 6 responses that I categorized above in this video do you resonate with the most? And some final thoughts for you: if you're someone who is not offended, it doesn't mean that you're stupid or not an ally or not as proudly Indigenous as someone who is. And if you're someone who is offended, it doesn't mean that you're too sensitive either. My only advice would be that we each have control over our own triggers and that we have the power to overcome them as well. Now, what is your main takeaway from this video? I would love to know. Please share in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below, and share this video with any of your friends who might be interested in learning something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.